You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome back to Switched On Australia, coming to you from the lands of the Arakwal people in northern New South Wales. I'm Anne Delaney. Great to have you on board today. If you've ever felt confused, misled or just plain frustrated trying to compare energy plans, well, you know you're not alone. Maybe you're familiar with the same name, different price plan tactics some of the retailers use. This is where you can be charged more for a plan as a loyal customer that shares exactly the same name as a cheaper version being offered to new customers. Or perhaps you've been sucked in by the better offer prompts, which encourage you to switch plans that you may not even be eligible for. Or what about the saver or value deals that can turn out to be more expensive than the retailer's default offer? Well, Choice, Australia's leading consumer advocacy group, has decided they've had enough of these tactics and they're taking action against confusing and misleading claims being made by energy retailers. They've lodged their very first super complaint with the ACCC. Under a new framework, Choice is now able to raise systemic and significant consumer issues directly with the ACCC. And in response, the ACCC has agreed to investigate part of Choice's complaint, and that's whether energy retailers are breaching consumer law by using words like savings or value to promote plans that in reality cost consumers more. And whilst they've acknowledged some of the other tactics are serious and widespread, they've directed those concerns to upcoming regulatory reviews being undertaken by the Australian Energy Regulator and Victoria's Essential Services Commission. Jordan Cornelius is the Senior Campaigns and Policy Advisor at Choice, who's leading their campaign on energy pricing. So, Jordan, can you just explain for me what is a super complaint and what does it mean for Choice to have the authority to lodge one with the ACCC?
So, super complaints is a new framework that gives Choice and two other organisations special status to make a complaint directly to the ACCC. We get one per year, and they have to respond within 90 days of us lodging the complaint. It has to relate to an issue that is either significant or systemic to consumers, so something that's widespread or causing quite acute harm. And once we lodge that, the ACCC has to respond publicly. So that's the key difference between a complaint that we might make. We make complaints all the time to the ACCC about dodgy consumer issues that we spot. But this one is sort of the big one that we get once per year to call out things that we think are particularly harmful.
So given you're limited to one per year, what does this say about the severity of the energy retailer problem compared to other consumer issues?
We have definitely heard from consumers that energy is a top concern. Our latest national survey data had 84% of households concerned about the price of energy. As we started thinking about what we wanted to use our first super complaint for, energy really floated to the top because it was something that people were so concerned about and that seemed so complicated. And as we started to look into it further, as we were planning the complaint, that became even clearer.
So tell me specifically what the complaint has focused in on, because I understand from what I've been reading that it's same name messaging and best offer tactics. Just explain what these are.
Yeah, so we collected 400 real, or close to 400 real bills from consumers. And because the better offer messages sort of give you a little picture of how much people could be saving on the plan that they're currently on versus other plans available from their retailer, that allowed us to, without necessarily looking at people's individual plans available to them. It was a snapshot of the loyalty penalty that they may be facing. And so the three sort of key issues that came through as we were looking at those bills were same name plans. And so that's where an energy plan. So I actually had this happen to me where I was on an Origin plan. I got a better offer message for the exact Origin plan I was already on, Origin Go Variable. And it said I could save $400 a year or something like that on Origin Go Variable. And I was like, well, that's the plan that I'm on.
Yes.
And I think this was right when better offer messages started popping up. So I kind of assumed it was a mistake. And when we started talking to consumers about it, realized that I wasn't alone in thinking
It was
that
rife.
That was a mistake.
Yeah.
That, these messages were rife and that other consumers were confused by it too. And so the reason that happens is that Origin Go Variable isn't one set of prices available at your address that everybody would be charged the same, that it's actually a bunch of different sets of prices that Origin may change quite regularly. Or, as we found, this is not specific to one retailer. I think it was 9 from the examples that we found that were doing this.
9 different retailers were doing exactly the same thing.
Of reusing the plan names, yeah.
Yeah. And just to clarify, so you were offered over, if you swapped plans to exactly the same plan, you would save over $400. But is that if you actually did the swapping, so to speak, i.e., because if you stayed on what you're on, it's the loyalty tax, which I think you mentioned. But if you pretended to get off it and come back in, you'd make the savings of $400. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. So the first bill that I got, I brushed it off as a mistake. The second one that I got, I thought, what? It's weird that this has happened twice. And so I went to Origin's website and I had a look at the rates that were on my bill versus when I plugged my address in, and it came up with the current rates if I were to sign up to Origin Go Variable again, even though this was, within a year of me signing up to the plan in the first place. And yeah, those savings were real. And I ended up actually saving on the rates that I had been being charged.
So, I mean, if that's the case, that the savings are real, why is it imperative to stop this sort of, what are we going to call it, marketing?
What we found firstly was that most people don't switch. There's so much data that shows that the majority of customers aren't switching. The better offer messages were introduced to help prompt consumers to do that. And if people are getting messages that they think are a mistake, they're going to brush it off. They're going to distrust those messages. And we're not going to see more people, or as many people as those messages are meant to be reaching, actually switching. The other problem that we see is that this just compounds the complexity of trying to navigate an increasingly confusing consumer energy market. And people disengage. 80% of people are being charged a loyalty penalty according to the ACCC, and things like this just cement that.
So do you think that most people who got an offer like this would do exactly what you did in the first place, that they would go, oh, that's a mistake, I won't do anything about it? Do you think that's an intentional strategy by the retailers?
It's hard to say, but what is clear is that the way things are set up, it is confusing, and it could be so much simpler. And I would say that the energy retailers could do a lot to make things simpler and clearer. We've reached out about these plans, or we heard from other consumers that had reached out about these plans, and their responses were unclear. So it does seem like there are a lot of barriers there that don't need to be there.
What would you like retailers to do with these same name messaging and best offer tactics?
That's a great question. I think that's the multi-million-dollar question at the moment, of how do we shift our focus away from entrenching these loyalty penalties, because as much as I would love to say that I think that if we changed how we name plans, then everything would be fixed. But I think that's, the evidence shows that that's not true. Switching rates are still going to be low, and it's still going to be the people that can least afford energy that are being served with these loyalty penalties. I hope that there are bigger systemic changes that would help address how entrenched this sort of unfairness is in our energy retail market.
So looking at the way bills are presented overall, is that what you're suggesting?
I think it's bigger than billing as well. I think it's the way that plans are designed and marketed. There is so many. I know, how long have we got? And, it's a time right now where there's a lot going on. We looked at bills because that's what we could collect from people. And I think that's the other challenge with all of this, is that there are so many moving parts, and so much of it is hard to get visibility on. It's hard to bring all the pieces together and figure out how we can, I guess, holistically tackle this. And we hoped that by looking at what we could see, we could shine light on one part of that puzzle that hopefully from here can fit into a lot of that other work.
Yeah, put the spotlight on the retailers. What about plans that are marketed as savings deals? Are they the cheapest?
So this is what the ACCC has announced that they'll be investigating further, which is very exciting. What we found when we looked at those bills was quite a few offers that were a saver plan, or had allusions to value in the name or description, that were either more expensive than another plan available from that retailer, that maybe didn't have savings in the name of the plan.
Right.
Or in some cases, we even found ones that were more expensive than the retailer's standing offer, which is meant to be sort of the maximum or default price that they charge people.
Yes.
So if something's labeled as a saver plan, and it's more expensive than that safety net price, then that's not savings, is it? And we heard from a lot of consumers that they do use these representations in their decision making because savings means cheaper. But what we found was that in a lot of instances, these plans actually weren't necessarily cheaper and were actually quite poor value plans.
So they could be costing consumers more.
Exactly. And in some cases, it was reasonably significant, the amount more that they were costing. In some cases, it was more expensive than the retailer's standing offer.
What sort of money?
So one of the examples, or one of the most significant amounts of savings that we found somebody was missing out on with these saver plans was $160 a year. Quite a few others were in a similar range, and that's a lot of money. Yeah, that's a month's bill. That might be a quarter bill for some households. Pretty significant savings.
Which is why it affects people on lower incomes and more vulnerable households, these sorts of claims.
Absolutely. That's, when you're struggling to make ends meet, $160 a year is a lot of money.
How widespread are those practices across the national energy market?
So that one's a little bit trickier to work out, because you're starting to get into what other plans might be available from this retailer for this person, what's their usage. There's other factors, so it's harder to pinpoint it in the way that we were able to with better offer messages and quantify it as clearly. But we did find a few different examples from different retailers, and we're hoping that the ACCC, now that they're investigating this further, will be able to get a sense of how widespread it is. But I certainly think that plan names in general, there are so many words that it's a bit of a word salad when you're looking at all of these different names of savings and values. And you sign up to a saver plan, and then the next month you're told you need to sign up to Saver Plus to save even more. The confusing names are certainly everywhere.
Who's most affected by these sorts of tactics?
We found that generally it's households on a lower income that are least likely to think of switching as a way to save, that are least trusting we find that particularly concerning because if you're a lower income household, your energy bill is going to take up a high proportion of your income. Lower income households are generally less likely to be able to take advantage of other energy saving measures like, appliance upgrades or taking advantage of things like solar and batteries. So the fact that our research showed, and other research from groups like Energy Consumers Australia has shown similar things over the years, that it is generally the people that can least afford their energy bills that are hardest hit by these tactics.
Can you share any real life examples or case studies that illustrate the impact on vulnerable households?
We don't have any specific case studies that I can speak to at the moment. Part of our process of researching the complaint was we surveyed our base of choice supporters, and we heard from a lot of people who, in some way, shape, or form, were struggling to afford their energy bills. And it was really, they felt defeated. They felt incredibly frustrated. They felt confused, and that it was causing them real stress to try and just keep up with all of this.
I mean, with over 80% of households concerned about electricity prices, and as you said, all the surveys are suggesting that, how does this, I suppose, confusion compound the pressure that people are already feeling?
That's a great question. What we heard from a lot of people is, sometimes if a household does decide to go to switch and then 2 months later they get a notification that their bills are going up, they feel like they're back at square one. They've got to go back through, trying to decipher all of these different types of plans. We heard from a lot of people who are really struggling with things like being forced onto time of use or demand tariffs that aren't suited to when they use energy.
Not being told that they're actually being switched either.
A lot of the time, yeah, absolutely. All of these we see as all working together to continue entrenching that loyalty penalty. It just shouldn't be this complicated to know if you're getting ripped off, I think, is the bottom line.
Why do you think energy retailers are continuing to reuse identical plan names for different pricing, and why do you think they're doing it?
I do think it comes back to some extent, or at least in effect, it comes to, if you log on, if you say, okay, I'm going to do it, I'm going to take 5 minutes to check what's happening on my energy retailer's website. You see, okay, there's my plan, and it comes up on Energy Made Easy, and it's the cheapest one, or it looks close enough to the other cheaper plans, and that's the same name that I recognize from my bill. If you've got 5 minutes and you're not looking at the fractions of a cent of the kilowatt hour because you're busy, because you're stressed, because you've been at work all day,
because you're a normal person leading your life.
Exactly. Then you look at those names being the same. That's the thing that you can recognize. It's the same as, you look for an internet plan and you say, okay, I'm on this many gigabytes, this fast plan. Okay, great, that matches. You go to the shop and you're like, okay, that's my favorite flower brand. That's what I expect. That's how much it costs. We recognize things by the name and by having the actual product, which is the price, right, with energy, buried in something that is tricky and confusing, then you end up with people just looking at the name, which I think is pretty fair because that's how we shop for most other things.
So the ACCC, as we've said, has confirmed it is investigating your super complaint. How significant do you think the fact that they've taken this on is?
We're really glad that they've decided to investigate this further. I hope to see that from their investigation they can take strong action against the energy retailers because I think it's important that they send a clear message that misleading consumers about savings or value, whether it's energy or in any other market, is unacceptable. People should be able to trust that words mean things, and saving and value are important words when you're trying to shop around. If something says say that it should cost less.
Do you know whether or not any of the retailers have stopped using these tactics simply because the ACCC has accepted the investigation and is responding to your complaint?
Not that I'm aware of. This comes back to the opacity of how all of these plans work. So many plan names aren't visible when you check a retailer's website. It's hard to see exactly all of the different plans that people might be being sold and how they stack up against other plans, or if people are still on legacy plans. So as far as I'm aware, no, but it's hard to see.
If the ACCC finds retailers are breaching Australian consumer law or breaching any other regulations, what kind of enforcement or law reform would you like to see?
We think strong fines and hopefully money back for consumers as well, particularly for, any egregious examples. Because, if people have been signed up to something and they think that they're saving and they could have been saving hundreds of dollars a year, I think it's fair that consumers are compensated. But either way, we'd like to see strong fines, because I think that's the strongest way to send a message to retailers that not only is this unacceptable, but it will hurt their bottom line to be misleading consumers.
Do you reckon that this investigation could set a precedent for other essential service sectors where similar marketing practices exist?
I would hope so. That's why we picked energy for our ACCC super complaint, because I think it's important to say energy isn't special or unique. You still have to follow the same rules. And the Australian consumer law is there to say you can't mislead people, you can't lie to people. And so if you're lying to people about savings, whatever the product is, that's not on.
So while the ACCC is undertaking its investigation, what do you advise consumers do to avoid being misled or overpaying on their energy bills?
The advice, the best advice I can give is to go to your government comparison site. So Energy Made Easy or the Victorian Energy Compare. Check your better offer message on your bill. Even if it is the same plan apparently that you're already on, you may still be able to save. Have a look at that, see if it says you can save. But even if you can't save with your current retailer, you might be able to with a different one. And that you probably need to switch far more often than you might expect. A lot of people we know, it's every few years, or it's when you move house, or it's when you get a particularly shocking bill maybe. But to be getting a fair deal on energy, it's usually about every 6 months, if not sooner sometimes, that better deals are available.
Can I just clarify, is the ACCC specifically investigating the savings promotions, or is it taking on board your full complaint?
So it's specifically investigating the savings-related aspect of our complaint, and acknowledged that the other issues that we raised were significant and systemic issues, but pointed to other law reform processes underway with the AER and Victorian Essential Services Commission as the best avenues to address those. And so those are coming up soon, and we're hoping that they will address all of the other sneaky, dodgy tactics that we raised in the complaint.
Just a final question, Jordan. You said that the ACCC had 90 days to respond and say whether or not they were going to take up the super complaint. Is there a timeline for them to actually do their investigation?
So now that the ACCC has responded to our complaint within that 90 days, it's a bit of a waiting game from here as they take the time to investigate and have a look at what different examples of this behaviour they can find beyond what we detailed in the complaint. We're waiting. We hopefully it won't be too long. We'll wait and see.
Okay, and we'll wait and see too. We'll be very interested to see what the ACCC says on this matter. Jordan, Cornelius, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Thank you so much.
And Jordan Cornelius is the Senior Campaigns and Policy Advisor at Choice, and she's leading their campaign on energy pricing. As we've heard, the ACCC will now investigate whether some retailers are breaching consumer law by marketing plans like saver or value deals when they actually offer poor value. It's a move that could have real consequences if it's found to mislead customers. Meanwhile, some of those other tactics being used by retailers that Choice has raised are being reviewed by energy regulators, and we'll keep an eye on those reviews as they progress. But if there's one takeaway for consumers right now, it's this. Don't trust the name of the plan alone. Check your latest bill. Go to a government-run comparison site like Energy Made Easy or Victorian Energy Compare, and if a saver plan isn't saving you anything, it's probably time to switch. That's all for this episode of Switched On. If you found our conversation helpful, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And follow or subscribe to Switched On for more interviews and insights that cut through the complexity of electrifying everything, everywhere. I'm Anne Delaney. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and stay switched on.